Hey up. Right, well I put it to the vote last week, giving you two choices of video today. It's working quite well this actually, I'm enjoying it. I gave you two video subject choices, 5 things I hate about the Royal Enfield 350 Classic REborn, or a video detailing what modifications had been made to the 350 so far and my thoughts on the parts that had fitted. And a whopping 67% of you voted for the first video, 5 things I hate about the Royal Enfield 350. So that's exactly what you're getting today. Now hate is a strong word. They're more niggles than anything else, but you know, 5 things that niggle me about the Royal Enfield Classic 350 doesn't make a very good video title, and it probably wouldn't perform very well with the YouTube algorithms. Now I should make it clear from the start that these are just my personal niggles, and they might seem trivial to some people, but to others maybe not, and if they're looking at buying one of these bikes they might be glad of the information. On the whole, I don't consider these problems to be deal breakers. I just personally think that Royal Enfield could have done better. So before we get started on that, I will be putting a couple of video subjects up for the vote again at the end of this video. We did have some issues initially with the YouTube poll. I think I've sorted that out, but again, I'll explain that at the end. First of all, suspension, specifically here the rear shock absorbers to the Classic 350. I've got a criticism here, but also I'm going to leap to Royal Enfield's defence. When it comes to items like this on any production motorcycle, it's usually a bit of a compromise. I've heard a few people complain that the rear suspension on this bike is awful, even to the point of them selling the bike. I'm actually quite pleased with it. Now, those sort of complaints are quite common with any motorcycle. You know, I've heard people say, well, it's a cheap bike, cheap rear suspension, you know, you may as well just spend more money and get something like a Triumph. Yet, the rear suspension is generally one of the first things that Triumph owners replace on their T120s and Street Twins, because generally speaking, for a lot of people, it's not up to the job. Now, the issue that I do have with this suspension is in relation to preload adjustment. On the old Classics, they had this weird sort of upside down piggyback shock, and the reservoir actually got in the way and made it virtually impossible to adjust preload. It was so bad that Royal Enfield didn't even bother putting a C-spanner in the kit. I was quite relieved when I first got the 350 to see that the adjustment area is quite accessible and that they do actually include a C-spanner with it, although it's a bit of an odd design. It's sort of got 2 engagement teeth on it rather than just one. Now, that relief soon turned to frustration. It's actually very difficult to adjust the preload because the rear mudguard stay is in the way. There's a high risk of just taking the paint clean off it with your tool. So extreme care and a bit of fumbling about is required to, you know, actually adjust your suspension. It's not impossible, but it's far from convenient. Now, I understand that Royal Enfield were probably stuck for choices within, you know, the available price range to come in budget for the production of the bike, as far as the shock absorbers are concerned. But to my mind, they could have at least redesigned that rear mudguard stay very slightly, just so that it's easier to accommodate the tool, because it's a pain in the arse trying to do this without actually damaging the paint on the mudguard stay. In order to get the tool to engage properly, you literally have to have it rubbing against that stay, which is a recipe for disaster. All it required was, you know, a slightly different angle at the bottom fixing point for that stay to lift it up maybe a centimetre, and adjustment would have been a piece of cake. There's usually quite a lot of force required to increase preload, and then when it goes very suddenly. I can see a lot of owners damaging the paintwork on what should be a very simple and easy task. And if you try to hold the tool down at an angle so that it doesn't catch the steel, it doesn't engage properly, so, you know, it's not the best. Then next up, as you know, my problems with the paintwork on this bike. As you might be aware, I'm a time-served paint sprayer or automotive sprayer, and I am a bit picky over paintwork. It doesn't matter whether it's a cheap vehicle or a luxury vehicle, paintwork has to be done right. It's the focal point of the actual vehicle itself. Now, half the issue that I'm going to show you here is probably going to be limited to the chrome models. The other issue that I want to bring to your attention here might just be a one-off on my particular bike, or it may be an indication of a more widespread lack of care in the finishing of these bikes. Now, this really surprised me because the Meteor, the Interceptor and the Continental GTs are all finished very well in the paintwork department. But for some reason, Royal Enfield seems to have let itself down a bit with the new 350 Classics. The industry standard for automotive paintwork switched over to what we call a base coat and clear method about 30 years ago. That is, the actual colour that you see is the base coat. It's a non-weatherproof colour coat that needs the protection of lacquer in order for it to stand up to the elements. And that should be the case for nearly all motor vehicles now, whether it's a metallic finish or a solid colour. And the industry switched to this method because basically it's longer lived, it's a more durable finish. But it does take longer and is a little bit trickier to apply. There's more work involved. Now add that to the chrome versions where you're effectively painting over chrome, it becomes substantially more challenging. But Royal Enfield have been doing this for decades. They know how to do this properly. Now, briefly, what this entails is preparing an area of the chrome surface for painting, priming it, applying the colour coat, then putting on the decals or pinstripes, which on the tank I think are hand painted pinstripes, on the mudguards they're gold decals or coach lines. Then they apply a coat of lacquer to seal everything in. Obviously they don't want lacquer all over the chrome because A, it wouldn't stick very well and it would soon start peeling off, and B, it wouldn't look particularly good. So they have to mask off the chrome areas that they don't want to paint, lacquer the colour coat and the coach lines, and then when it's dried they have to polish it back because there will be a line left by the masking tape where it's been masked off. This is essential for a good finish, and this paintwork that you're looking at now on my older Classic 500 is about as perfect as you're going to get a paint process like this. A nice crisp polished in lacquer line right on the edge of the coach lines, almost invisible. Royal Enfield knows how to do this and they know how to do it properly, so I was both surprised and disappointed to find that the mudguards on my bike are, in my opinion, a mess. No attempt has been made to rectify those masking lines whatsoever. They've just been left exactly as they were when the masking tape was ripped off, which is lazy and unprofessional. No paint job would ever leave my body shop looking like this. As you can see here on the lower half, I have actually rectified this. It's not a big job, but some people will have difficulties with it, and let's face it, a customer should not be having to finish the paint job off for the factory. Now, the other issue that I came across is dirt in paint. The base coat had been handled prior to lacquering, and this is actually on the fuel tank, but the paint technician hadn't taken the trouble to tack off or clean the base coat before applying the lacquer. So we've got what look like several finger marks, sort of white marks underneath the lacquer that can't be removed. And although I did find these a little bit challenging to video, believe me, to the human eye, these are in your face. Once you've seen them, you can unsee them. Again, no paint job would ever leave my body shop looking like this. Now, I think these have been done with dirty gloved hands. There's 3 of them all together, and if you look, they're all identical in shape, or pretty much. And really, no qualified paint technician has any excuse for turning out the work that I've shown you here. Now, the dirt in paint is one issue that can happen with the solid coloured bikes or the chrome bikes. Not heard of any other reports of this, mine is the only one that I'm aware of, but the issue with the masking lines on the chrome seems pretty widespread. I'm not saying that every chrome model will exhibit this kind of poor workmanship, but I have heard of this happening on both the bronze chrome models and the red chrome models like I have on mine. Whether this is indicative of an adopted work practice in the factory, or whether it's just the result of one rogue paint technician sort of skipping bits, I don't know, only time will tell. As with any new vehicle, examine your paintwork carefully before taking delivery. If you're not happy, reject it. In my case, Royal Enfield weren't prepared to accept detailed photographs as evidence of a warranty claim. They said that I had to take the bike into the local dealership, which is 40 miles away, so that's an 80-mile round trip, at least half a day, just to ascertain whether they're going to cover it on warranty or not. I shouldn't really be put through that inconvenience, and to be honest, I can't afford the time. And this is basically the first time that Royal Enfield have left me feeling unhappy over a purchase. These defects should have been spotted at several of the quality control checks at the factory, and they should certainly have been spotted at the PDI. When a customer's paid a premium for a premium paint job, it's not really acceptable. Next up, number 3, the LCD info panel on the dashboard. I understand why it's present. Modern customers expect a higher level of information on what's going on with the bike. It's the positioning in that additional window that I don't like. For me personally, it upsets the sort of classic layout of a bullet dashboard. On other models, this LCD display has been incorporated into the main speedometer itself. Now, I realise that would probably have meant enlarging the speedometer, which would have been a bit of a challenge when you consider the amount of space that you've actually got available here. But that's where I would have preferred it to be. It ruins the classic symmetry of the whole dashboard area, and although I realise that it should be clearly visible and easy to read for the rider, I think it would have been better if it had been incorporated into the speedometer. Which leads me into gripe number 4. All other models in this range have a gear indicator. The Classic 350 doesn't. Now, on my initial review of this bike, I didn't think it was going to be an issue. I'm not too bothered about a gear indicator. But the characteristics of this engine do make it difficult to ascertain what gear you're in sometimes. This engine is so smooth and quiet that there are times when I find myself quite frequently trying to click up into top gear when I'm already in top gear. We know that the necessary electronics and hardware are present on this bike because the Meteor has a gear indicator, and I can't say for certain, but I suspect that the new Hunter 350 will also have a gear indicator. I'm baffled as to why they've left it out on the Classic. Now, it can't be to preserve the sort of vintage aesthetic appeal of the bike because they've stuck that ugly rectangular LCD display in the middle of the dashboard. So that clearly can't be the reason. I don't know, you tell me what your thoughts are. And then finally, again, sticking with the dashboard, cheap chrome plated or vacuum plated plastic trim. The ignition surround plate is made of plastic and it's so cheap and tacky it actually moves at the slightest provocation. The bezel that surrounds the speedo and the LCD display again is vacuum plated plastic and lots of it. It looks and it feels cheap, and then you've got that sort of Royal Enfield badge on the right where the tripper should be. Again, and this is just my opinion, the whole thing looks like a dog's dinner. To be honest, it's got the aesthetics of a cheap Chinese moped. Now, on the outgoing models, the bezel that surrounds the speedometer was, I believe, polished aluminium, and the ignition plate was proper chrome-plated metal. It was subtle and it looked classy. This doesn't. Even at a casual, quick glance, these items look blatantly cheap and plasticky. I really wish Royal Enfield had taken a different approach here. Right, so there you have it, 5 things I hate about the new Royal Enfield 350 Classic REborn. Now, as I've said, these are just my gripes. My opinion doesn't represent the opinion of everybody. If you disagree, don't get your tights in a tangle. Now, Friday's video, I'm going to give you 2 choices. Again, you have the option of a video detailing all the accessories that are fitted to the Classic 350 and my appraisal of them, having some experience of them after fitting. Or your second choice, I can't help but notice that the new Hunter 350 has been released in India, and I've had several comments from people asking my opinion of it. Now obviously this is difficult because it's not going to be available in the UK for some time yet, so I can't actually get my hands on one. I would also have to do a bit of digging to make that video because there is a distinct lack of video and photo material available to construct a video from. But I aim to please. If that's what you want to see, that's what I will put together for you. Now, last week's choice, the YouTube poll I put up, initially we did have some difficulties, people couldn't access it through the link in the video description. I think this was just a glitch on the part of YouTube because I'd just copied and pasted it automatically via the facility that I've got on my dashboard. And a lot of people found that they couldn't get access to it, especially if they were using mobile devices. Now the way I solved that in the end is I just manually copied it and then pasted it, and it seemed to be okay after that. We got a total of 1,200 responses to that poll, which is fantastic. I'm going to do the same in the video description on this video, so if you want to vote for which video you want to see, that's where you'll find the link. If it doesn't work initially, don't worry, I'll be on the job. I will sort it out if we experience a similar glitch. Once again, thank you so much for watching this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. I would also appreciate it if you enjoyed this video, if you would be kind enough to leave a like and perhaps consider subscribing to this channel if you're not already a subscriber. It helps me out and I really appreciate it. Now, I will of course be back on Friday with the video of your choice, so until then, please ride safely and I'll see you soon.